There's nothing more important to a defense than getting pressure on the quarterback, and there's a brand new guy near the top of the list, at least, in this edge rusher class coming out today. We're going to get into that, where he belongs, and what happens next on Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back Eric Crocker. And of course, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Tracy. He is at Ryan Tracy NFL on Twitter. I am at Eric_Crocker. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day and every day, as all Locked On podcasts are. And we also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet online, where the game starts. And right now we're starting with a special defensive end, Myles Murphy. He has now announced he is officially entering the 2023 draft class, and we want to talk all things Myles Murphy. Where is he at? Where does he stack up with other guys like Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Andre Carter, Nolan Smith, Isaiah Foskey? We're going to get into all that and more, but first, let's just talk about him as a prospect. So, Ryan, you look at things from a little bit more of an analytical approach. What do those numbers say about Myles Murphy right now?
They say that he's a guy that wins his reps an inordinate amount of time, and that one-on-one he can get things done. Are the pressures as much as, say, Will Anderson or the sack totals? No. He plays in a front, though, that you gotta spread the love around, because everybody's getting some pressure in that Clemson front. There's probably, 6, maybe 7 guys that are going to eventually play in the NFL. Right now, he's at the forefront. Obviously, his teammate, per se, has really taken a lot of attention as well. We're talking edge today, so we'll get around to him. But I think what's really interesting is Myles is, I feel, a little bit less explosive than Anderson, but gets things done in a different way that allows him to be nearly as productive. And I think when you project them to the next level, if they can get into a system that really plays to their strengths, I can see him actually blossoming maybe a little bit quicker, being a guy that right now can follow in the footsteps of Christian Wilkins is balling out, right? Took him a little bit to get going as well. So I think that there's an upside there that you can compare. And it comes down to this. A lot of people think that he could be a top 5 pick along with Anderson. And the question is there enough there, knowing that you have Jalen Carter in the mix as well, is there enough room, in your opinion, in, say, the top 5 to have 3 defensive guys and 2 quarterbacks? Is that what we're looking at?
I think when you look at these classes, especially with a polarizing quarterback class like this, right, you see guys creeping up, and you're not sure exactly where some of these guys are going to go. We did this a lot last year. We started kind of having these quarterbacks jump over maybe some more premier position type guys, and then, before you know it, there's one guy that gets drafted in the first round. And definitely doesn't go nearly as high as people thought, right? You got Kenny Pickett. He ends up being the first guy taken at pick 18. Everybody else starts to drop in the 3rd round. So when you look at, I think this class is something that can be like that as well. I think there are going to be a lot of teams that are up and down on where these quarterbacks are, some of the things that they see, and even guys like C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, what are they going to say about his size? Got Will Levis at Kentucky, where I think people are going to be all over the place on him. So I think that is just that conversation right there will allow a guy like Myles Murphy to really jump into potentially the top 5 and kind of leapfrog some of these quarterbacks that maybe the media might be a little bit higher on than some of these scouts.
Yeah, it could certainly work out that way. When you compare the two just statistically, as their output, 59 pressures for Anderson, 14 sacks, right? Well, Murphy, again, playing in a different front, 34 pressures, 6 sacks. Didn't get home as much. I'll give Will Anderson this. He and Isaiah Foskey are 2 of the guys that have the best finish percentage in this class. They're going to be up there way at the top, because when they do get loose and they're not drawing doubles, they have a tendency to be able to finish a little bit better. But I think what's really interesting is when you break it all down about how many pass rush snaps you have, they're actually pretty comparable. So statistically, for this season at least, we'll be able to compare those guys on a number of different levels with really apples to apples, just because they played a lot of the same area in terms of the volume of pass rush they got.
All right, so when you look at Myles Murphy, do you think that this is a guy that maybe should be, dropping in the coverage less? How do you see him being utilized at the next level? Is this going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker? He has a ton of size. I think there's a lot of versatility that's there as well. 6'5", over 270 pounds. But is he going to be just more of a pure 4-3 edge rush type prospect? Or what do you think some of these teams are going to think about him?
I think he can do both. It's going to be, are you willing to have linebacker that is – when you do drop him, because I think he actually does a pretty good job getting into space. Are you comfortable with that? Because he's not a burner. He's never going to be, but he is a guy that understands where he has to get to. And I think for my taste, he's a little overused in pass coverage at the college level. I hope that they just let him focus on driving at the quarterback. I don't see enough wide 9 snaps for him. I think he's going to grow in that way as well. But like you said, he's listed at 6'5", 275. I think he actually might be pretty close to that. When I look at him, it's 265, 270 probably at this point in the season. So I think that's healthy weight for him. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to be drastically different when he weighs in at the combine or anywhere else. So I do feel like that's a legit representation of what you're going to get from him. So the question is, how do they match up? Where do they go on? And is there anybody else that should be jumping into this list? So we got to get to that as well.
All right, so let's talk about that next and how he stacks up. We talked about Will Anderson out of Alabama. I think people have him pegged definitely as the top edge rusher. There are some people that are starting to think, is he the top guy? Is he not? Those are questions. We're not having those doubts. I think we know he's number one, but is Myles Murphy that number 2 guy, and how does he really stack up to him and other guys? We're going to talk about that next. But first, we want to talk to y'all about the good folks over at LinkedIn. All right, and these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the access to be the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. All right, LinkedIn Jobs, they are going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I have a business. I own a gym, and I'm going to be needing other qualified gym instructors to help with different things, and not just sports performance training. You got yoga, you got boxing, all type of things. Well, LinkedIn, that is definitely where I'm going to look to find the people that I need. They're going to help me. All right, LinkedIn Job helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster, and they post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we are sure you are going to love. All right. That's why you'll be able to find a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion available right now as a bonus episode on Locked On Presents. Think Like a Champion. It's a brand new podcast from Russell Wilson. Yes, Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos, and it's on Audible. Russ is a champion on the field, not this year, but in the past, of course. But off of it, we rarely know the grind on the path of greatness. And Russell Wilson, he's going to let us in on that alongside his co-host, Harry Wilson. All right, and the late Trevor Mowat digs into how high performance athletes, artists, and leaders push the boundaries of potential. Each episode is going to feature interviews with Olympic medalists, NFL stars, business leaders, hosts. They're going to be swapping stories. They're going to share their proven mental techniques that they utilize. This is some of the things that I'm going to listen to. Again, we talk about podcasts, training athletes, doing these things, and we're trying to tap into the business-minded things. This is the podcast for you. So head over to Locked On Presents for a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion, or catch the full episode series available anywhere you get your podcast. Available everywhere right now. Audible. Get in the game. And talking about getting in the game, Ryan, Myles Murphy, he's definitely in the game, definitely a big-time prospect, but let's dig a little deeper on how he really matches up with some of these guys. So I'm going to throw a name out there, and you let me know just kind of some of your thoughts. I know you're really big on Nolan Smith, and some people are a little higher on him, or some people have him a little bit lower. He doesn't quite have the size of a Myles Murphy, right, who's 6'5", 250. But Nolan Smith, 6'3", 235 pounds. How do those guys stack up different with such different builds?
Definitely different. Nolan's a 3-4 outside backer all day long that you got to put down and let him come off the edge when he's got a little bit of space, right? Whereas Myles, you can put him inside if you want to. You get plenty of versatility. It's just from, say, a 5 in it versus a 7 out. So there's plenty of technique to go around. I do like Nolan. He is the number 3 on my list currently as I start to really dig into the film to go along with all of these stats. But it's the production equivalent of what you get to see in terms of how many reps they actually win in terms of one-on-one win percentage, the pressure they produce. They're in that similar vein. Nobody is really up there with Will Anderson. When you take a look at the production side, he's winning upwards just under 20% of his reps. Obviously, he's produced the most sacks in college football this year. High end, he and Tyree Wilson are also up there in terms of the total pressures. Wilson's winning, by the way, at a rate of 22% on this particular season. Then you take guys that are playing either in more of a front or getting more attention. That is not just a chip or something simple. And that's where Murphy comes in. It's a little bit more workmanlike. KJ Henry, his brother, BJ Ojulari, are more in that kind of area. It's not quite as dramatic, but I think that they rank up there just as well because there are a number of ways you have to go about it. But when it comes down to it, I like Nolan in terms of his speed and his first step. I know there's an injury, so that's going to have to play into it. So I don't think he can be included right now with Murphy and Anderson in the top 2 discussion. But the question for me is, where is that value? Is it really 2 guys in the top 10? Because I don't think until recently people were really thinking that was going to be an opportunity. I feel like there's a little bit of artificial push up into the top 10 for Murphy right now. I think he should be right around that 8 to 10 range. I see people look at it like 4, and that seems a little bit high to me, but that's where I'm at right now. Who knows what we'll find when we start digging.
BJ Ojulari, man, you talked about him, and that's a guy who, anytime you watch LSU, he just jumps off the screen. He's energetic. He has the athleticism, know about his brother and the things that he's able to do. So you start to kind of look at this edge class, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I want to know, how does this edge class stack up against maybe last season's where maybe you don't have as big name prospect going up extremely high?
Yeah, I think it's just a lack of dominance. There's nobody that really, other than Will, that's saying, I can take over a game. And honestly, Will Anderson's, I think 2021, one of the film reviews that I'll be breaking down are side by side, 22 versus 21. He played inside more in 22. I think he played with a little bit more weight on him, and I don't think he looked quite as explosive. I don't think it was quite the same as 21. A lot of people kind of feel that, but yet the production was still there. So that gives you that variance in either way, that he can get it done in a number of ways. The rest of the class, I think BJ's a stand-up guy too. I don't even know what he weighs in at. I don't know what he's listed at, but I would put him more in the Smith range than the Murphy and Anderson range in terms of being like more of a 3-4 outside backer type guy that really ought to be coming off of a 2-foot stance. I know he can get down when he wants to. He's made a couple plays there. He's been really efficient at getting to the quarterback though, because he's down there, I think 49 pressures produced, but 9 sacks. So it's that ratio of how many times you're getting after the quarterback and have a chance, how many times you're completing. And that's pretty good percentage in this class as well.
There are a few more guys that I think we should talk about from this class, including Isaiah Foskey. And again, we are matching up some of these guys with Myles Murphy. I want to know, how does Foskey match up with Myles Murphy? We're going to talk about that next. But first, we want to tell you a little bit about Bet Online and how it is your number one source for your sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, which is kicking in swing right now. You got the basketball, you got the World Cup. Everybody's tuned into that. Shout out to Messi. He's doing his thing. We got all of that at betonline.net. And, if you love sports, I'm pretty sure you love sports podcasts, and you can find those at betonline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. So head over to their website today or use mobile device to learn more about BetOnline, where the game starts. So Myles Murphy against a guy and again, we talk about this edge rushing class. I think this is one that's going to start kind of really got shooting up. I could see 4 guys going in the first round, but Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. Love his build. Long arm guy.
Yep.
Just looks like an edge in today's game. And you want guys that can really kind of put their foot in the ground, change direction. I just watched some of these guys play against the 49ers and just how fluid those guys are, especially on Tampa Bay. And you got Joe Tryon there playing on that defensive line. But Foskey, where does he match up with Myles Murphy? Because they're a little – it's still different looking in built because Foskey just looks a little bit longer. But as far as height, weight goes, they are a little bit more similar.
Absolutely. Foskey's going to win the weigh-in at the Senior Bowl. He has accepted his invite. He will be there so much so they even list him twice on the site right now. So everybody down at Senior Bowl, you might want to check that. But yeah, I mean, that tells you the gravity of it, right? Yeah, the length certainly is there. A guy that he leads this class in one of my bigger metrics that is that finish rate. He doesn't get as many opportunities. He doesn't get as many pressures on the quarterback as Murphy or Will Anderson. But when he does, he finishes those plays. And that's something that goes into the algorithms that we use to really compare about not just what the raw numbers are, but how many times it computes to plays on the field. And that's really, I think, where he has the big advantage. Obviously, he took over the sack lead at Notre Dame, so he's got a historical stat there. That's always good. Leadership traits as well. I think that's going to be probably the thing that in the interview rooms, both down in Mobile and certainly in Indianapolis, are going to make or break where he goes, because I think teams are going to fall in love with his leadership skills, his accountability, the way that he's able to relate to his teammates. Can he put it all together, and does that get him that bump to get into, say, like that top four like you were talking about?
How many of these guys do you see going in the first round? Because we rattle off a lot of names, and there's going to be guys that end up climbing throughout the draft process or potentially falling. And we see that all the time, too, guys that you think are going to test extremely well. I remember Polite coming out of Florida, and it's like, oh, man, this guy, you watch him on film, and you see some of his pass rush moves and what he's doing, and it's like, man, this is a, for sure, first-round type guy. And then he goes and he just bombs the combine. Runs terrible. It doesn't do well pro day. None of that, right? Just out of shape, not fast, not fluid. You're like, oh my goodness, what happened, right? So we know that that's going to happen. But right now, again, a lot of guys, a lot of names that we've talked about. How many guys do you think go in the first round?
I actually think that it's going to be a little bit lighter than people think right now. It is dependent, though, I think, on a couple of things. How many offensive linemen are actually worth a first-round grade? That's up for a lot of debate. I think this is a squeeze because I think the value in this edge class is going to be on day two, somewhere between that 50 and 70 pick, I think is going to be the sweet spot, because you have all the guys that we've talked about, plus Tyree Wilson, plus Andre Carter. A lot of people think that he can be a fringe first rounder. I have him squarely on day two, but that's all right. We're going to go through this process, and everything kind of chips into it. There's Hall, there's McDonald from Iowa State, all these guys that I think are within striking distance. And if they can elevate the pre-draft process, I think that will take them up. And like you said, like Polite's a good example. There's a process for a reason. There's all these different facets that go into it. It's not just the on-field production. It is the interviews. It is obviously the physicals are going to take care of themselves, but it is about making sure that you're prepared. This whole thing is a test to make sure that you're dedicated and you're prepared to do what you need to do. And that includes the combine and the pro day and the Senior Bowl and everything else. So there's a lot that can still change.
Right, and I think that's going to be exciting. We're going to be watching on how a lot of these things change with a lot of these guys at different positions, receivers, quarterbacks, running backs. I mean, the quarterback one, I think that's the most polarizing. We spent the most time talking about that, but all around that, and we haven't even gotten to this cornerback class. Can't wait to talk about those guys and more, but we're going to save that for another episode. We definitely want to thank you for making Locked On the NFL Draft your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen of the day, check out the Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most and the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide for you. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. But it's going to do it for this episode. We'll come back tomorrow with another position, more topics, more prospects, and more. Keep it locked right here, Locked On NFL Draft. Peace.